So it's been a good long while since I have done any posts here. I planned on posting several times. In fact, that was the goal. However, the issue is not just regarding age and how the difference between, this is like 4 months ago when I had first kind of started going into trying to bulk up just naturally. And I thought things were going to be going really well. And then I just ran into this issue where I got too big. I got too much muscle mass and fat mass for my size. And I just had zero energy. I went from training every single day. Things were going really well. The intensity was ramping up. Arms just kept getting bigger and bigger. I was going natural. I'd put on a little fat, and then I would be able to kind of work that into harder muscle. And then all of a sudden, it just turned to the point where I could no longer provide the energy, the nutrients, the rapid uptake of nutrients to keep the energy going. So a little over a month ago, it was just so bizarre. You know, I had been training. My kids went to Hawaii. I felt like this is the time, man. I'm working on my legs. Everything's coming up. And then I hit that point again where I realized I just can't hypertrophically train anymore for size, you know. So the point here is that I'm really only able to get to this type of conditioning, but I could take this much, much further, right? Where I was last year, a little over a year ago. That, of course, is like 2 years ago, 2023. So 2.5 years ago. And that's just drinking, eating, and then just beginning to lift a little here and there at 54 years old, 53 and a half, 54 years old. And most people, you know, why take your shirt off? Well, how else are you supposed to know where you're at? Why flex? How else are you supposed to know what those individual muscles are looking like, what the performative aspect is? And then, of course, this is 1 year later. So it just shows you what you're capable of doing. But mainly what I was doing, what I miss quite a bit, is walking, being able to effectively just focus on eating all the time. Like, people have no idea what affects true carnivore, you know, render. I mean, I personally love the diet, and I had to learn the hard way that it's okay to weigh 150 pounds, especially if you're able to lift more, walk more, do more, and have more energy and more vitality. And it's never going to be perfect. You're never going to reach this status or this place where, you know, without PEDs, which is just a temporary fix. And I could get into talking about that because I have an extensive amount of, you know, when I get into something, I try to learn about it through the entirety of the scopic practice of what it involves, top to bottom, bottom to top. So when I was in my 40s, I got into, this isn't nearly where I had taken it to, but this is just the first cycles that I got on. And here I was, you know, I was lifting very, very heavy. I was lifting heavy in kind of this family sort of gym atmosphere. And I realized, man, I could really take this quite far. And then, you know, long story short, the people in my life began to get very jealous. The town that I was living in got jealous, right? But it just shows you how quickly you can turn your conditioning around. You can go from this sloppy, floppy skin, you know, hanging off of you to once you get that down, once you get that application down, you can change things very quickly and very rapidly at any age. But what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get moving, right? So the big area that I was left with after messing with the hormones is to realize that I had to bring my body fat down to those really ultra low levels before I would even see a huge decrease in the man boob area, right? And that's just something that happens when you're messing with your estrogen and estradiol levels, and they don't just return back to a sort of base. So for, you know, if you ever read the testosterone syndrome, old school book, right, where it was mainly talking about different types of testosterone that could be used. Pellets were used in a really big way because it's like this very slow release that didn't. So I think it was Andrew Fry. It didn't jack up so that it caused just an aromatization, right? And then this is about as big as I can like get these days, right? I think I got up to about 195 pounds like in the morning, right? And didn't have a considerably huge amount of body fat on, but this is just like a few months ago here, you know. But I do, you know, I start to pack on fat. So what I'm going to be doing this time around is I'm just focusing back on what I can deal with and what gives me the energy. So I'm going back on carnivore. I'll be doing carnivore starting next week, and I'll be focusing more on heavy. I've got weights, so I've got a bench. I've got, thanks to my kids, I've got heavy dumbbells. We're getting more weight equipment, so it's more to do with this type of conditioning, but fuller sort of muscles. So that's where we were again. Oddly, that's kind of the conditioning that I'm in right now, but I'm not nearly as heavy. So, in other words, in about a month, I could turn things around. So I'm going to do a little, like, not going to say movie, but I'm going to do like a longer form video where I'm showing the progressive state from where I am now to where I'm going, because it'll be pretty quick. I've focused on metabolic flexibility is the beauty here. I guess if there's one caveat or one thing that I could walk away with, it's that, right? It's that it's not going to take me 8 to 9 months to get back into the conditioning or to burn the excess fat off that I had. So this is just not training. That's just sort of going back in, just starting to train and eating what I want, drinking large amounts of alcohol. And then this is 1 year later visiting the same exact spot. So keep in mind that I had not started to walk or to move. I was just focusing on carnivore for several months. Didn't see the scale shifting as much as I thought I had initially. You know, I'd been working and doing things, and I was out there just moving around, and all of a sudden dropped 25 pounds of just pure fat. So I got down to like maybe 210, 215, and then getting from 215 down to like 200 pounds. It was a larger venture, right? And of course I got quite a bit leaner than this. This is when I was switching over to going back up into the Northern California, right? Of course I have a lot of shoulder issues. This collarbone was broken at a very young age, so you can see there's a lot of asymmetry. There's a lot of pain that I have here. A lot of pain in the lower back, where I actually had to learn to walk twice in my life, where I was bedridden and I couldn't even stand up. I've got all sorts of issues with the hips. I've got anterior pelvic tilt in the hips. So there's a lot of issues that keep me from just being able to freely, naturally just go into this sort of unlimited hypertrophic quest. But I will admit that the temporary fix of knowing what you're doing and using low-level anabolics is remarkably efficacious and effective if you don't get greedy with it, if you understand how to microdose. But that goes with that goes without saying, really, because when people understand, when they know, and when they're doing low-level nutrient profiles, in other words, instead of just loading up, when I talk about beef liver and the huge benefits, that's if you're walking and you're training and you're going through your the mineralization, the supply of minerals that are available to you, where you have this input and this output, right? We really operate much more like piezoelectric fields, right? And when you start to get that flow in, you just stay with it, right? And it really is a rhythm, right? So I had managed to completely mitigate the man boobs, but I had to get down to almost 150 pounds. Was I weak at 150 pounds? No, I wasn't. I actually was surprisingly had kept my strength. I was just really tripping out on the fact that I could be that thin. I never thought that I could get that small, like that thin and that tiny, really, and still have the strength and the power, the fortitude. This is something that I think I pulled off public. So I hadn't been working out here. And so this is when, you don't have the pump, you don't have any of this stuff. I wasn't walking or anything, but this is just sticking with the diet. So yeah, this is like last year, a year and a half ago, right? So I could have hung on to this and gotten much leaner. So this is really the goal over the next 4 to 6 weeks, right? Is to get down to this, and it's going to take a lot of walking, a lot of training. But I've got the TRX now that I'm able to work out on every single day. Of course, the bands, and then I've got weights and a weight bench, and I'm going to be most likely getting a barbell and some columns so that I can actually do squats. I can do everything that I was doing in the gym, where I don't need to actually have a gym to be able to really push myself. So, in other words, it's going to be very progressive and a very focused. At 56 years old, it's going to be very focused on squats, deadlifts, and a lot of circuit training. And I plan on recording a lot of that. I'm getting some flooring quite possibly as well, and just setting up a little gym in the other room and trying to get my kids involved as well. So I just wanted to say I'm still out here, still focused on this, still trying to get my energy right. And I already know the way. I've got, 4 containers of protein that I just bought. So what I typically do is I'll start out, and I go through this on this channel, but I typically start out doing a protein therapy. I'm really big on orthomolecular nutrition and science. I do a protein therapy where I go through and try to boost up the amount of high quality, very quick assimilable protein powders. So I've got this carnivore protein that I'm taking in right now. I've got 3 different 4-pound containers of animal protein, which was on sale. I was posting up those sales here, and I'll try to get back into that, where I can really create more of a community advocacy, right, for people who are not just trying to lose weight, but really trying to work with, as older people, really trying to work with what they have. Not just older, though, right, and trying to get themselves back into this very honest state that involves your wrist measurement, pennation angles, how you're put together, and what type of training best benefits you. And I had already done that, and it's not something that, so we go way back here, right? We go like 2 years back into my training, right? Let's go way back here before. So this was the basic result, where I hadn't worked out for maybe a week or two. Was left with some pretty loose skin, but that's something that changes considerably. Right, so this is what we're getting back to in the next 2 months, but more fuller, more solid, and training from different areas, different directions, where I'm actually able to hit these areas, the traps and the rhomboids, right? I'm able to do the rotary exercises on the TRX, right? I'm able to hit the upper chest because I'm able to hit those shoulders and the caps and so forth without overdoing it, right? Because I got to the point where I wasn't even able to really scratch my back. I was in such pain in my shoulders just from repetitive use recently, last month, that I just had to let my joints take a break, right? And I think this is when I hit the gym last year. So what, about exactly a year and a half ago. And I really could have taken this on to a whole nother level if I was to just be able to keep training here and stay on carnivore. This isn't me cutting down on my calories. This is eating several thousand calories every single day. And I was just trying to transition from what I was doing down here. So it took me a while when I got up to Northern California to get to this place where I could hit back into the gym. And so this is, in the next 8 weeks, essentially what I'm looking at getting back into, but fuller, focusing in on more lifting, right? More lifting, more compound lifts. I was obviously doing a lot of legs here as well, but predominantly focusing on high aerobic output type exercise. So you can see how I had that level of leanness, but I wasn't working on these specific areas, right? At specific angles, right? But I had the leanness. I was maybe about 3% body fat from being able to decipherably see all the striations and so forth. So this type of development, because I think I was working on arms that day, that type of development is what I'm going to be producing and coming out with. But in the hamstrings, the quads, the abdominal area, it's going to be a full on all around looking at that type of development, right? And not letting it consume or take over my entire life, So I've got those 55-pound dumbbells, and I really want to get my kids involved in this, right? So I'm trying to represent that sort of advocacy heading into my 60s, right? And being realistic about it, right? Not trying to look younger than I am or have that as the main central focus, some sort of paracosm or aphorism, but being grounded in the fact that I acknowledge where I am, what I'm doing, and not that I wasn't or haven't. And then this is around that same time, just with some different lighting. And why do we do these captures? Is it vanity? It has nothing to do with vanity. In fact, I was so busy that it became, time intrusive to be able to do this, where now it's going to be what I focus on, among other things. So, if you can picture 2 or 3% body fat lower than that and being able to see all the striations there, that's what we're going for. We're not going for just a measurable size. We're going for development, in other words. So that is what to look out for and what to expect from this channel going forth. And I love protein powder. And the fact is that this whole bioengineering, right? When you look at soy products and things like this, there is more genetically modified foods stuffs going into that than there is just straight up bovine whey. And that's what we're focusing on, is bovine whey, right? So it takes a while to hit that sweet spot, right? It takes that a while. It took me many, many months to get into this type of conditioning.
Where I am. 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 Where
Like you could say that this is kind of the sweet spot right here where I'm not in amazingly good shape, but for a 55-year-old man, right, you've got some tone, definition, and the body fat is lean enough. So I have a, even though it doesn't look like it, I have a remarkably small, genetically a small waist, right? To where right here, my waist was probably about 31, right? Even though it looks like it's probably a little larger, like in the 32 area, I have a very small bone structure. So I was able to get down to a 26-inch waist just soon after here.
Training that I've done today.
I wasn't cutting back on my food.
This really is just
I was never hungry. I never advocate starving. Right? So later, that type of definition, I didn't even have to flex to have that type of definition, right? So that's kind of what I'm headed toward. I also want to get a lower back extension apparatus because that's a weak area of mine that inhibits and keeps me from doing these types of exercises. But I love doing back. I love doing legs. That's your powerhouse, right? And obviously arms are a big area, and we'll be focusing more on shoulders as well. So those are some things to look out for. And I wanted to go back up to those areas in Northern California. And another thing that taking not necessarily daily, video clips, but sometimes it could be more sporadic, right? Is you can kind of see when you're fuller, right? When your body kind of like hits a sweet spot where you didn't realize, oh, I might have taken it too far. So, I mean, this is a really good spot to where I've gained enough a level of leanness here. At 55 years old, I'd gained a level of leanness. I could really go anywhere from here if I just get the diet right. Well, I've got the diet at least down on paper right now. I've got it correct. So this is a lot of beef. This is probably, believe it or not, 4,500 calories worth of eating. This is a lot of buttered coffee. This is a lot of bacon, right? I think I was eating shack burgers like they were going out of style, right? I had a lot of energy. It was hard for me to keep up that amount of food intake. And this is just what's achievable just doing carnivore, right? To go from where I was to being able to just relax here, right? Totally relaxed, drawing in a little bit. Here I still had a little bit of fat on the side, but this is a healthy place to be, right? And one could say maybe I pushed it a little too far in the walking area where I just kept getting leaner and leaner and leaner. Right now there's going to be an exchange between those two modalities, right? So that was in January, the end of January, and where I had taken that in the succeeding 2 months after that, really got to that sweet spot where I had been training more, and I kept up with that 4,500 calories. So that is the sweet spot in my opinion. When your metabolism's just cranking away, eating fat all day long, trying to make sure that I'm not overdoing it on protein. So the sweet spot with protein for me, with my bone density being small to medium framed, that sweet spot is sitting at 150 grams of protein per day. But your protein can really mess with, right, your protein intake can really mess with your overall fat metabolism, So I miss my joints being able to go through movements like that. Yes, being ultra thin and smaller, it gets to you. But when you get older, you'll be better off just staying small and keeping yourself moving, and that means your joints have to be able to, seamlessly move between exercises. Not only that, being able to lift a relatively, when I say heavy, right, you really have to think about what's most beneficial for you and your joints the next day, the next week, when you're sleeping. So if you're in such pain when you're sleeping, it's not going to serve you or anyone else. In fact, you have to kind of think about what it is you're working on besides this, right? This is just sort of the donation station. This is where you start, right? This is where you start the benevolent aspect of trying to improve upon yourself, right? This is me like leaving the gym and just going for a little walk here, getting a little pump on, getting along with my day, going out there and walking, moving, and eventually I would have gotten into running here, right? So this is just last year. It's amazing how quickly you can get it off. It's amazing how quickly you can put it back on. Of course, I had only put on the weight where I am now, weighing a couple 100 pounds. Because I dropped off my focus. I don't just put weight on fat now. Even if I eat really terribly, the result of this is that I never really get over 200 pounds now. So I'm a good 50 pounds lighter than I was prior to. And it doesn't matter what I do. Like, it doesn't matter how much I'm laying around, how much I eat. I effectively took off 50 pounds and kept it off. To take off another 50 pounds and get down into this area, it happens almost overnight just by focusing in on walking, moving, and getting this flow going, right? Where you never want to go. You might do a couple sets where you go 4 to 6 reps, but then you blend it in with other exercises, right? You really want to focus on blood flow. The beauty with carnivore is that even after eating, say a 1,500 calorie bomb, where you're just taking in massive amounts of beef liver, beef, right, bacon, you're really hungry, your body needs to, you need fuel. You go in and do that, or maybe you're just prepping up. Like in the mornings, one thing that I would do is I would prep up with buttered coffee, right? So no calorie restrictions, huge amounts of calories here. No movement restrictions, right? Seamlessly going from exercise to exercise, but constantly being hungry. And the only thing that really messed with me here is I was going back to work and I wasn't able to drink the water. In fact, you're going to run into issues where you realize how much you have to use the bathroom. So when you are effectively training and you're on carnivore and you're doing really, high fat intake, you're going to hit some patches that aren't pretty, and you're going to need to be nearby a bathroom, right? So it's the kind of thing where many people don't do this because they don't work office jobs or they don't have access to the bathroom throughout the day randomly, right? Randomly. And the biggest thing here is to take in enough water. Like you've got, for me, I would drink maybe 2 gallons of water every single day. It's just water. You're constantly thirsty. Of course, getting in enough sodium is a huge issue sticking on carnivore. But I plan on going back into carnivore and then also doing the orthomolecular protein therapy as well. So right now I'm in the preparatory stage where I'm just kind of still eating what I want, but I'm upping my protein intake, the high quality protein that I'm taking in. So I'm up to doing about 3, heading into 4 scoops per day. And then next week I'll be ordering some beef and all the supplies that'll last me for a good 6 weeks. The eggs. So I have a base and I've talked about that base on videos right here on this channel, and I'll be talking about that more. So I think I might have. So here's the protein powder power pudding, right? How we make the whipped cream that you can put on them. And you can eat very well. The brown sugar swerve is a big issue there. I love this protein. I don't have any of that right now, but when the best protein comes on sale on Amazon, these are 5+ pound containers, I'm always there. And then this is where I was just some months back. You know, I'm able to get myself down into that 185 area with pants on and everything. So 182, 183 pounds, right? That's what I get down to and where I stay now. So that's the beauty of doing carnivore, then blowing it, going off carnivore. I get right back down to 180 pounds with no problems whatsoever. So look out for some good things to come, but I'd kind of like to show what terrible shape I look like I'm in right now and how quickly I can turn that around, because this is about really being there for other people, showing what can be done conceivably, and mostly talking about what it's like being 56 years old, going on 60 doing this, right? And to not cheat, you know, to not sort of act like I'm doing nothing at all, right? And I'm not trying, and nothing to see here, to show that it takes a huge effort, but that when you do it correctly, when you focus on the proper nutrient profile, mostly macros, right? It's mostly getting in those macros. Then, of course, the beauty with beef is when you're taking in large quantities of beef, of relatively high quality beef, not this stuff. So I showed how it is on the road, the cost. It's absolutely not doable. You can't do this, right? You have to pre-prepare. It's good for you to get like a Foreman type grill or whatever you have to do in order to keep yourself going. But I mean, to be on the road doing that, that's a tough one. And this is where I was, right? So I was 157 pounds in the morning, fully clothed, everything, 165 pounds. And that's when I had started to put on a little bit of muscle mass there, right? So I was about 157 pounds. This is just kind of a meal sample or example, right? Where I would, especially if I didn't have much. So I got cheese here, eggs, right? Like there are no egg whites, right? When you cook your eggs, it's in a mass amount of oil or butter. You're going to put butter on everything. You're going to try and keep your ketone levels up. It takes a good 2 weeks to get that down. You're going to get headaches. It's just you're going to like really be overly generous with things like cheese and heavy cream, right? And that's after eating like that. That's after the meal, right? This is what you look like when you're taking in all that grease, you know? I got skin hanging down here. This isn't trying to cut back on calories. This isn't exercising all the time. This is just exercising a few times a week, mainly doing pull-ups, bar dips, right? Some abdominal work, but this isn't out of the ordinary. You're not doing anything that's really reaching beyond yourself, right? Throw a t-shirt on, you're out the door, and people think, you know, like you could step into a fitness professional type job here, you know, put on a nice polo shirt and talk to people and put a smile on your face. So you really, it's a way that you really can get back into a sort of normalized life and lifestyle that you thought that you could only have maybe in your 30s, right? And you can kind of represent that as a person of advanced age, you know, somebody who's going through what everyone's going through, that this aging process is not easy on anybody by any means. But I'm not going to be able to put on size in the sense of, you know, bulking up anymore. But I will be doing a lot of compound lifts, pushing myself, but it's going to be it's going to be carnivore based. It's going to be carnivore focused, and that just shows you what you can do. And I'm not going to say this was a year earlier, but it was pretty close to that, right? From like 240 plus pounds with a small bone structure down to 155 pounds, right? You can do that. You can lose 85 pounds relatively quickly and keep it off, and you can eat very decadent, and it's not going to be that much of a stretch, right? And that's just kind of like what we look like in the morning, right? Without that much effort. So we're going to be putting quite a bit more effort in and focusing on these areas like stiff arm push downs, right? To where I'm able to work out through the day, every day, without going too heavy the day before and really taxing my joints so that I effectively, and we don't even need to touch this. Like when you eat correctly, you're not even going to crave carbohydrates. This isn't a treat, It's like this was around Thanksgiving where I spent another Thanksgiving all on my own, just like I did yesterday. My kids came later, but it was like way later, and it was kind of like a charity case. Look, I don't need any charity cases, right? And I'd like to, in the future, start to spend Thanksgiving around people who think like I do, who make the efforts that I do, and to be able to be there for other people, right? That's that type of community effort is what's required, right? So it can take a while, right? You get down from like 180 pounds down to that area, right? So this obviously was me walking and training pretty considerable amount of time to get down this 20 pounds. It took me 3 or 4 months to get down there, right? Now it's going to happen much faster, right? Because I'm kind of like starting a little bit higher than this area. I'm probably at 195 pounds right now in the morning, which the first week that you're on carnivore, it's so weird, but you don't realize how much waste you're holding in your system. So to get down like 10 pounds, it almost happens overnight, right? In the first 10 or 12 days, you're going to drop 10, 12 pounds, especially if you've just been eating whatever you want, doing whatever you want. You go through this reset with your pancreas, with your insulin levels, with your blood sugar, and all of a sudden your body starts going, wait, it's safe to drop fat. And the secret to that is lots of buttered coffee and lots of buttered tea, adding butter into everything. That's a big deal. And then satiating yourself and eating enough beef, snacking on bacon through the day. You'll end up sleeping better because you're training harder, right? So here I still had that sort of larger man's thing going on, even though I was walking constantly, right? The shoulders shrunk up, but the chest and the belly fat kind of stayed up there, right? That's why you don't want to do too many power type movements, right? You want to do more fluid exercises that involve less, right? Less actual violent ballistic force on your joints. You got to start thinking about your joint movement, right? And how the exercises you're doing, like too much repetitive forced movements at one particular angle like this, it's not going to add up to good things, right? You want to be able to go much lighter, more fluidly, and focus on more circumduction type exercises, but even more so, getting into the NASM, National Academy of Sports Medicine protocol, is how these different joint systems work together through functional movement. So that's what's to look out for in the next year, where we really are focusing on that, and then doing a lot more live streams and focusing on answering questions and things like that for people who are really struggling and trying to achieve this type of thing. And then opening up a forum to be able to discuss this. Pretty soon I'm going to be definitely having people asking questions, because I'm going into specific modalities and states, right? Where I'll be getting back into a place like this, and it's like, how do you do that? And it's by staying consistent. It's not rocket science. Just be consistent, stick with it, and you will reach your goals. and you have other things to do that are much more important than just the mere aesthetic, but we use the aesthetic as a proving ground to say, this is where I am, this is what we've achieved, now this is what we're going to do with it. And hopefully my dreams of being able to get outside and to go for runs, like going into 10Ks and showing up on time to do those 10Ks and showing my pre-meals and my after meals and things like that. Carnivore just makes it easy. So I'm going to be going back into a carnivore lifestyle. I'm ordering that up next week, and that's what's to look for. So there's a lot of good focus going on here, and I want to shatter this. This was pretty much like the height of what I was able to achieve just naturally right here. Some going on 20 years ago, over 15 years ago. But yeah, this is closing in on 20 years ago. I would love to be able to just blow the socks off of what I did 20 years ago when I thought that I'd reached this peak, because I didn't know about carnivore back then. This is just on protein powder, right? Protein powder power. So even though I love protein powder and I do use it as a general staple all the time, no matter what, right? Sometimes I'll cut down on it so that I can just focus in on getting enough fat in. So this is a carnivore-based. Rogue Beast Warrior is a carnivore-based channel, and it is 100% focused on carnivore as the main central theme, right? And then do I have the carnivore? So I like to watch a variety of different channels, but do I have? So that's me, putting on a lot of water and putting that fat back on. But I did get quite a much bigger arms. I mean, my arms were approaching 17.5 inches just most recently. So I was getting back up there, but I just couldn't handle it. I couldn't carry it with me, right? My body just couldn't deal with that sort of brutal, blunt force movements. And yeah, I got much bigger than that, but to stay lean is the whole issue, right? But where is my carnivore pyramid? So here, buttered coffee, right? So this is 3 months ago, and this is what I should have just stuck with, right? But we learned the hard way, and it's never a loss, because like when you start to approach the winter months, right? Your body wants to put on a little bit more body fat. It's natural. This is probably about where we're still at, right? So we effectively kind of like bumped it up, and we're just going right back down into that area, right? So this is kind of where we're at. It's no big deal. Yeah, no real definition. So you can see you might put on a little bit of muscle by eating carbohydrates and cycling in carbohydrates, but what 56-year-old, that's doing this naturally and not lying about it is going to want to carry around extra body weight, whether it's muscle or fat? And I think we'll end it there, right? But this is kind of where we were. There's my puzzled face where it's like, do I really want to do this, right? Just, putting all this stress on my joints and stuff just to get a little bigger arms and so forth. So staying proportionate, being able to move, enjoying the movements, enjoying the exercises, getting myself back down to that 150 pounds. By the way, Serge Nubret was taking all kinds of shit, right? But he was eating he was on a gluconeogenic diet. That's predominantly what Serge Nubret did here. So when you look at these people that seem like icons, they really weren't telling the truth about the things that they did. And when you find out, and then, if you think that this was Mr. Universe in 1959, I mean, when you think about where we've come and what changes have occurred in the aesthetics, I mean, this is what, right? This is what training all the time and being celebrated as the best at that time. I mean, right? So when you look at PEDs and you look at how they influenced modern culture, right? It's not that impressive. I'll tell you, my physique was more impressive than this when I was in my 30s. Far more. And I was even stronger than this guy. Just naturally, never having touched a ped. So, you know, and then he didn't stay in that type of shape. Like this is him near peak condition. It's not that impressive. It's sort of a swimmer's body that just went on a bulk cycle, right? It's not that impressive. It's not that impressive. Like anyone in the gym today, pretty much you could go up to someone randomly that just trains at a Gold's Gym that has a far better physique than that. Even Steve Reeves, it just wasn't, when you look at the factual aspect, you take the oil off of there and everything else, that's not that impressive. Like what we're capable of doing today, really, even for somebody who's advancing in years, with what we now know about the carnivore and the types of lifting and the joint systems, and just where these kinetic movements and physiological functional mobility type exercises that are just taught in the NASM protocol, right? We could actually achieve a superior physique above this of the 1954 standard. And that really wasn't that long ago. That's not that impressive. That's not that impressive. To be hailed as this is the premier physique worldwide, globally, that everyone celebrates. Those are the types of aesthetics that we need to focus on without all the prima donna BS that goes along with it. Just being somebody who's a functional person in society going about their day. All right. Look out for some amazing things to come. A lot more live streams, and we'll focus on questions and answers and just dialogue. Talk to you soon, folks.